I was a head shorter than the smallest of them, and I went at all three of them at once anyway. It was late on a Friday. The canal smelled of cold stone and cheap beer, and I had just come off shift when I heard them. Three big men under a lamp, two of them locked together by the railing, one standing a little apart in the dark, and I did not see friends, and I did not see the quiet one at the edge of it. I only saw size. I only saw alphas. I did not pull out my phone and I did not call for backup, and that was my first mistake. And I knew it even as I started walking, but I walked anyway. "Police," I said. "Break it up. All three of you." They stopped, not out of respect but out of surprise, and their eyes traveled down me from my face to my hands, already reaching for the cuffs on my belt, and one of them smiled. It was the calm one, the one who was not really drunk, who looked at me like something he could not quite place, and studied all the closer for it. "You really mean to take all three of us in?" he said, almost gently, and then, "How many pairs of cuffs did you bring?" I had one pair of handcuffs, three alphas, any of whom could have lifted me off the ground with a single hand, and he knew it, and his grin widened. So, I grabbed him, because I wanted that grin gone, and I shifted my weight to put him down the way I had drilled 100 times, and my back foot found a skin of algae and canal water instead of stone, and the world slid out from under me. The smallest man on the quay, one pair of cuffs on my belt, going down at the feet of three drunk alphas by a black canal at night. And what happened in the next breath, the thing that finally made me run when I had never run from anything in my life, was the last thing on earth I was ready for. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's story. To understand why I went at three alphas that night, you have to start from the beginning. You have to know my father. My father was an Omega, and he was the gentlest person I ever knew, and I watched that gentleness make him smaller over the years. He apologized before he entered a room. He lowered his head when an alpha spoke, automatically, without anyone ordering him to. He said his own name quietly, as if he did not want to burden anyone with it. I loved him, and at the same time I ached for him to raise his voice just once, one single time. He never did. He grew tired, and then sick, and then he was gone, quietly, the way he did everything, and I stood at his bed and swore to myself that I would never become like that no one would make me small, that if I had been born an Omega, I would at least be an Omega who did not duck his head. So I became a police officer, the smallest in my class. The only one of my designation who made it through training without once asking for leniency. I ran the courses faster than men who towered over me. I learned to put an alpha who weighed twice what I did on the ground, because technique does not ask about designation. I held my own scent down so hard and for so long that no one at the station knew what I was, and I told no one, not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted them to see me as a police officer first, and only after that, if at all, as an Omega. Most of the people at the station were fine, a few were more than fine, and one, a colleague named Nozomu, hated me from the first day, and I never found out why. Maybe because I was faster, maybe because I never asked for help, maybe he just needed someone to look down on, and I was the smallest one in the room. I made a note of it. You make a note of things like that. But I pushed it aside, because I thought my work would speak for me. I was young enough to believe that. The evening it all started, I had a long shift behind me. A shoplifting, a traffic accident with no injuries, an old man who had lost his way, and whom I walked home, and who took me for his son. I was empty and raw, and I only wanted to walk along the water until I was tired enough to sleep. And then there were the three men under the lamp, and I did what I have already told you I did. I went at all three of them, and I let the calm one bait me about my single pair of cuffs, and I grabbed him to wipe the grin off his face, and I put my weight wrong on the wet stone, and I went down. But I did not hit the ground. A hand closed around my upper arm, a second found my back, and I was not caught like something fragile. I was held upright, with a matter-of-factness, like he had known the whole time that he would have to hold me. My face landed against his shoulder, and there, so close that his scent was the only thing in the world, it hit me. Warm beeswax, roasted barley, and under it something dry and green and bitter that I did not know. and that still felt like something I had been looking for my whole life. My breath went crooked. Something under my ribs, a muscle I had not known I had, pulled tight and did not let go. I felt him go still above me. Felt his hand at my back close a fraction tighter for a moment. Felt the breath stop in his chest. He smelled it too. Whatever it was, he smelled it too. I tore myself loose, so hard that I nearly fell a second time. The other two had gone quiet, looking back and forth between us, and the brother opened his mouth and closed it again. The calm one just stood there, his hand still half out where my back had just been, looking at me like the floor had been pulled out from under his feet. And where his grin had been there was now something that scared me more than any threat. "What's your name?" he said. And it did not sound like a drunk man asking a police officer. It sounded like his life hung on the answer. And I, who had come there to prove to 3 alphas that 1 omega could stop any of them, turned and walked away. And then I ran, and I heard no footsteps behind me, only his voice, once calling the name I had not given him into the night. I ran until the canal and the lamp, and that scent, lay far behind me. It did not help. I could not shake him all night, and some part of me already knew the running had settled nothing, only put it off. What you do not know yet is what came after. For days I smelled him in moments when he could not possibly be there, while I brushed my teeth. In the canteen over the smell of rice cooked too long. In the middle of a report I had to start over more than once, because warm beeswax and roasted barley kept rising into my nose where there should only have been paper and coffee. I told myself it was my imagination, that an omega who keeps himself clamped shut for years sometimes gets phantom sense, the way people feel a leg that is no longer there. I did not believe a word of it. A few days later, he was standing at the station. I came back from patrol, and he was sitting on the bench in the entrance, in a dark suit that fit him like it had been poured on, and when he saw me, he stood, slowly, and that crooked smile came back. But this time there was something careful in it. "There you are," he said. I was starting to worry I'd have to ask every officer in this city whether he tried to arrest 3 drunk idiots down at the canal the other night. I stopped where I was. "What do you want here?" "You." He did not raise an eyebrow. He did nothing dramatic. He only looked at me. "It's been a while since anyone ran from me. Usually they run toward me. It won't leave me alone." "I did not run. You ran." "I was there." He took a step closer, and I smelled him again. Real this time. No doubt this time. And my body reacted before my head could stop it. A pull low in my stomach, a shiver down my back. I saw his nostrils widen. He smelled me too. Even with my scent pulled in as tight as I could hold it, this close, he smelled what I was. "Omega," he said quietly. No judgment, only a fact, almost reverent. Crushed shiso leaf, green mandarin, and under it something cool, like flint. "I've been trying to forget it since you ran from me at the canal. It doesn't work. If you want to go telling people, go ahead." "Why would I?" He looked at me like I had said something absurd. "I only want your name, the one you didn't give me at the canal." An alpha who had seen me the way I was, small and furious, and going at 3 men at once, and who now stood here wanting nothing but my name. "I should have left," I said it. "Asahi." He repeated it, once, quietly, like he was tasting it, and I could have sworn the roasted barley in his scent turned sweeter for a moment. "Rintaro," he said, and laid a hand briefly on his own chest. "And one of the idiots you tried to arrest with a single pair of cuffs was my little brother, Yuma? He still talks about you. He thinks you're the bravest thing he's ever run into." I wasn't brave. I was careless. Could be both. And there was the grin again, and this time I did not wipe it away. This time, to my own horror, I almost wanted to answer it. That was how it started. Not with a thunderclap, but with a man in a good suit who found out where I worked, and who told me he was a lawyer, and who asked whether he might take me to dinner to apologize for his brother. I said no. He nodded, having expected nothing else, and left a card on the counter, and went. And I stared at the card until the colleague at the front desk asked whether he should throw it away, and I said no. "I'll keep it." Far too quickly. On the card was his full name, and under it a profession that put a cold stab in me, attorney. And under that, smaller, his specialty. Designation, discrimination. He was the man Omegas called when a company would not promote them because of their designation, when a landlord evicted them, when a hospital treated them differently. He spent his days fighting for people like me, and I spent mine pretending I needed no one to fight for me. I do not know why that made me so angry back then. Today I know. I did not call him, but Matsu is not a big city, and fate, or whatever was pushing us around back then, had apparently decided that a no from me did not count. I saw him again at the market on the weekend, where he stood with a bag of clams, haggling with an old woman who treated him like her grandson. I saw him in the rain outside a tea house, where he gave a soaked street musician his umbrella and got wet himself. I saw him without looking for him, and every time I smelled him before I saw him, and every time the muscle under my ribs pulled tighter. The third time, I was the one who stopped. It was late. I had another double shift behind me, and he sat alone in a small place by the canal, at the exact spot where it had all started, with a bowl of noodles and a book. He did not look up. He only said, into the noodles, "You can come in, Asahi." I don't bite. I've never once managed to bite anyone who looks as determined as you. I went in. To this day, I do not know why, except that my legs made the decision before I did. I sat down across from him, and without a word he slid the menu over to me, and I ordered, and we ate, and he did not ask me a single question about my designation. He asked why I had become a police officer. He asked whether I always ran that fast. He asked whether I knew that I frowned when I thought, like a man watching a sum refuse to add up. I told him to stop staring at me. He said that was one thing he couldn't promise. And when we left, at the door, under the same lamp, he stopped and looked out at the water. "This is where you tried to arrest me," he said. "This is where you got in my way. This is where you got in my way. This is where you lay in my arms." He said it quietly, without looking at me, and the air between us went tight, only for a moment. And I haven't been able to think about anything else since. I should have said something quick. Instead, I looked up at him, and he looked down at me, and the space between us was suddenly smaller, without my having seen either of us move. His eyes dropped to my mouth. I felt his warmth through the cool night air. His scent settled around me like something warm, and my knees went soft, and I hated it. I hated how much my body wanted him, while my head screamed that this was exactly where the getting smaller began. I stepped back. I have an early start. He let go of me at once, though he had not been holding me, and stepped a whole pace to the side, gave me the way clear, the whole quay, the whole night. "Of course," he said. "Good night, Asahi. Don't run too fast." I did not run. For the first time on that canal I walked slowly, and I felt his eyes on my back the whole way, and I did not turn around, and that cost me more than any arrest I had ever made. It became a pattern. He never forced anything on me. That was the confusing thing about him. An alpha who wanted something, that much I knew, and still he waited every time until I took the step. He sent me messages that asked for nothing. A weather warning before my night shift, so I would pack a jacket, a photo of his brother holding a pair of toy handcuffs and grinning. The question whether I had eaten yet, and if not, whether I knew the place on the corner was open late, with no mention that he would be waiting there for me if I came. Sometimes I came. More and more often I came. And every time the pull in me grew stronger, and every time my fear grew larger, because I noticed I was starting to look forward to him, and looking forward to someone, I had learned early, is the first step to relying on them, and relying is the first step to getting smaller. What I did not know, what neither of us knew, was why it was so strong, why his scent would not let go of me, why I could breathe near him like I never could otherwise. I took it for infatuation, and I feared it like a sickness. Once, on a free afternoon, I followed a curiosity I would not admit to, and went to the courthouse where he had business that day. I sat in the back row, in plain clothes, and watched him. It was a small case, a shop assistant, an Omega, who had been kept from advancing because of her designation, and the lawyers on the other side were smooth and loud and sure. Rintaro was none of that. He was quiet. He asked short questions and waited for the answers and let the other side tangle themselves in their own words. And when he was done, he had not raised his voice once and still held the whole room in his hand. Afterward, I saw the shop assistant cry with relief, and I saw Rintaro shake her hand and let go again quickly, so she would not think she owed him anything. On the way out, he spotted me in the back row. He stopped. His crooked smile came, but this time there was something soft in it, almost vulnerable. "You were here," he said, like he could not quite believe it. "I happened to be nearby," I lied. "Of course," he said, and we both knew it was a lie, and neither of us said so. Until the night we found out. It was Yuma's birthday, and Rintaro had invited me, and I had, as always, said no first, and then come anyway, in plain clothes, with a far too expensive bottle of sake in my hand, because I did not know what you give an alpha whose brother you almost arrested. It was a small gathering in Rintaro's apartment, which sat high above the lake and was far nicer than I had expected, with windows to the floor that held the water like a second sky. Yuma hugged me like an old friend. The third man from that night, Rintaro's friend Tsukasa, pushed a beer into my hand and called me the bravest police officer in Matsu, and everyone laughed. And for the first time in a long while I laughed with them. Late, when the others had gone, I helped Rintaro in the kitchen. We stood too close together as always, and I handed him the glasses, and our fingers touched, as always, and this time neither of us pulled back. Outside the lake lay still. Inside there was only the rush of water from the tap, and then he turned it off, and the quiet after was so loud I could hear my own heart. Asahi. He said my name the way he always said it, like something precious you must not drop. "Can I tell you something without you running away?" "I don't run anymore." "Good," he turned to me. We stood so close that I could smell the roasted barley under the beeswax and the warmth coming off him, and I saw that his hand, resting on the countertop, shook just slightly, though the rest of him was completely still. I've met a lot of people in my life. I've never met one my body behaves like this around. I know what that could mean. I'm afraid to say it out loud, because I'm afraid I'm only wishing for it. What? Instead of answering, he slowly raised his hand, gave me every second to stop him, and when I did not stop him, he laid his fingertips against the side of my neck, at the spot where the scent gland sits, where I let no one. And in the moment his skin touched mine, our scents melted into a third thing that neither of us had ever carried alone, something warm and green and alive that filled the whole room, and we both held our breath, and I saw in his face that he felt it too. "Oh," I whispered, and it was the same "oh" his brother had said that first night, and only now did I understand it. "Fated mates," Rintaro said, and his voice broke on the word, that calm, sure voice that never broke, and that hit me harder than anything else that evening. "That's what you are. That's what we are." I waited for the fear to come. I waited for the old dread to rise, the picture of my father with his head bowed, the certainty that bonding means surrender. I waited, and the fear did not come. Instead came something I did not know, something so light and so enormous that my eyes burned. It was relief, as if I had spent my whole life bracing a door against the wind, and someone had just told me the wind had stopped. "I thought it would feel terrible," I said, and my own voice sounded strange. "This, finding out there's someone, I thought I'd feel like prey." "And?" I looked up at him, the grinning alpha from the canal, the man who had lent me an umbrella and sent me weather warnings and stepped back every time so I could take the first step. "I don't feel like prey," I said. "For the first time in ages, I don't feel alone." His thumb brushed over the spot on my neck, and I heard the breath leave him, and then he kissed me, at last, and I grabbed his shirt and pulled him down to me, instead of waiting for him to bend, because I would be damned if I was even a centimeter smaller right then than I could be. He laughed into the kiss, that low, surprised laugh, and lifted me onto the counter with no effort. So we were level, and I understood that he did not do it to master me, but so that I would have to look at him straight on, not up. His hands found my hips and stayed there, warm, asking, and when I pulled his shirt out of his trousers, he said my name against my mouth, half warning, half plea. Asahi, if you start this, I don't know if I can go slow. I'm Sahi. 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 I didn't ask you to go slow. No. His mouth moved from my mouth to my jaw to the spot under my ear, and I heard my own breath turn into something I did not know. But I'm asking anyway. I'll always ask you. His teeth grazed the skin over my scent gland, ever so lightly. No bite, only a promise he did not keep, and my back arched toward him. And the new scent, our scent, grew so dense it made me dizzy. His hand went under my shirt, over my stomach, up, and I forgot I had ever been afraid. I forgot my father and Nozomu, and the station. I forgot everything except warm beeswax and the mouth at my neck, and the hands that held me as if I were not fragile, but precious. And that was something else entirely. He did not go slow that evening, and he stopped at the right moment, at the line where closeness turns into something that cannot be undone. And he leaned his forehead against mine and breathed hard and said, we had time, all the time in the world, that he did not want to rush anything I would carry with me my whole life. And I, who had never in my life believed anyone who promised me time, believed him. The weeks after were the happiest I had known, and because I had not known them, I did not know how to hold on to them, and secretly waited for them to be taken from me. We took our time, the way he had said. We did not bond. No bite, no mark, no rush. But the days we spent against each other left traces others could smell. I noticed it in how the alphas at the station kept a step of distance they had not kept before, and in the short nod the few omegas gave me now, one that said, understood, you're spoken for. I carried his scent without being bitten, and I carried it gladly, and that frightened me almost as much as it made me happy. Autumn came, and with it the first heat I could no longer hold down. I had kept myself clamped shut since I presented, holding my own scent in like a breath you refuse to let go. But a body only obeys that for so long. Every omega who tries it too long knows that, and still I had pushed it out of my mind. That night, it caught up with me. I woke, and my bedding was damp, and my skin burned from the inside, and it took me a long, dazed moment to grasp what was happening to me. A breakthrough heat. Early, shorter than a full one, but unstoppable, and there was nothing to clench it back with this time. Nothing to do but ride it out alone. And an omega alone and frightened in a heat like that is exactly how the drop we had all been frightened of as children begins. I lay there, shaking, and the old shame rose, the shame of being a body you cannot control. I reached for the phone before pride could stop me. I wrote only one word, his name. He came, without asking why. He smelled it when I opened the door. I saw it in his face, in his own scent going darker, tighter. And I saw, too, how he took himself in hand at once, how he kept a step of distance, though it plainly cost him. "Tell me what you need," he said, his voice rough, only that. "I'll do nothing you don't ask for. Nothing." What I needed was him, not the way my fevered body screamed for at first, but simpler, deeper. I needed someone to be there, and to stay. I pulled him in, and he let himself be pulled, and he did exactly what I asked, and not one bit more. He fetched cool cloths and laid them at the back of my neck. He held me when the waves came, pressed his scent gland to my neck, not to claim, but because his scent was the only thing that stilled the fever for a few breaths. I clung to him, and he whispered into my hair that he was there, over and over. "I'm here. I'm not leaving," and his hands stroked over my back, slowly, while his own body shook with the effort of holding back. It grew hot between us, Of course it did. His lips on my fevered skin, my body arching toward him, his name that I said into the dark, like a plea. But every time it reached that one line, he stopped and laid his forehead against mine, and breathed with me until we both slowed. "Not like this," he said once, hoarse. "Not in a heat. When we bond, you'll want it because you want it, not because your body forces you. That's how much you're worth to me. That's how much you're worth to yourself." I cried that night, not from pain, but because no one had ever told me I was worth it to myself. By morning, the worst was over, the breakthrough heat as short as it had come, and I lay in his arms, hollowed out and strangely whole, and he had not slept the whole night and had not once let me give anything I had not given myself. I had believed my whole life that an omega in heat was the most helpless thing there is. That night, I learned it can also be the opposite. That there can be power in being held by someone stronger than you, and knowing he will not go 1 centimeter further than you allow. Nozomu smelled it too, of course, and for him, it was the last proof he had never needed in order to despise me. "I knew it," he said one morning in the locker room, loud enough for half the shift to hear. "I knew something was off about you. An omega. An omega the whole time, pretending to be one of us." He laughed, and a few laughed with him. Uncertain, not because they agreed, but because it's easier to laugh along than to stand up. "No wonder you shake on every call." "I don't shake." I shut my locker, calm, and did not look at him, because I knew that was exactly what he wanted, for me to look at him. And whether I'm an omega or not changes nothing about the fact that I hand in my reports on time and you don't hand in yours. It went quiet. A few of the others drew a sharp breath. I should have kept my mouth shut. But I had kept my mouth shut my whole life when alphas spoke, the way my father had, and I had sworn not to. And sometimes a vow is wiser than the moment you make good on it. Nozomu's face went red. He said nothing more in the locker room. But I saw his look harden and go cold. And I knew that look. I had seen it often enough to know that he does not forget and does not forgive. And I knew then, with a cold in my stomach, that he would wait for his chance. It came sooner than I thought. It was a call on one of the last warm evenings, an emergency from an apartment block on the edge of town, an argument gone out of hand, a man on a rampage, reports of a knife. Nozomu and I drove together because the roster had paired us, and I felt his tension in the car like a smell. I told myself he was an experienced officer, that he knew what he was doing. That was my second great mistake, and this one nearly cost me everything. We arrived, and the situation was worse than reported. The man was not alone. There were two, and one really did have a knife. And in the stairwell, a woman was screaming. It all went very fast. I radioed the situation in and called for backup, the way the rules require, calm, with time and place and number. Nozomu did not listen to me. Instead of waiting for backup, instead of securing the floor, he went forward, alone, in his pride, and left the man with the knife at his back. I saw it coming, before it happened. I called his name. I stepped in between. I got hold of the arm with the knife and turned it, the way the training had drummed into me, and the man was bigger than me and stronger than me, and still he went to the ground, because technique does not ask about designation, and because right then I had no fear, none at all. The woman came down the stairs unhurt. Backup arrived. It was over, and no one was seriously hurt, and I stood in the stairwell with my heart racing and thought, we made it. I should have seen from Nozomu's face that I was wrong, because in the report he wrote that night, the one he filed before I had even started mine, stood a different story. In his story, it was I who had ignored the rules. I had rushed forward without securing the situation. I had called for backup too late. Through my conduct, I had put the woman, him and myself in danger, and only his decisive intervention had prevented worse. And then, the sentence that poisoned everything, written in the calm language of a man who knows how a report has to sound to be believed. One had to ask whether an officer with the colleague's physical build and designation was suited to patrol duty at all. I learned of it a few days later, when my superior asked me into his office and shut the door and told me a complaint had been filed and an internal review opened. Until it concluded, I was suspended from patrol duty. Desk duty. No car, no weapon, no partner. And if the review concluded that I was unfit for the service, then my career ended here. I heard the words, and I did not hear them. I only saw my father's face. I had spent my whole life on not being the Omega people take for weak, for unfit, for too small, and now it stood in an official document with a date and a signature, and it would stay in my file no matter what I said. The sentence I had run for my whole life had caught up with me, and it was in the handwriting of a colleague I had never done anything to except do my work better than he did. "It was the other way around," I said, and my voice did not sound like mine. He rushed forward. I called for backup on time. I stepped in, or the knife would have hit him. My superior looked at me, and I saw that he might even believe me, and that it changed nothing. "Then prove it," he said, not unkindly. "At the hearing, word against word won't help you, Asahi. You need more." I went home, and I did not call Rintaro. That is hard to explain, and for a long time, I could not explain it to myself. The one person who could have helped me, whose whole profession was exactly that, protecting people like me from exactly this. And I did not reach for the phone, because if I called him, then I admitted I needed help. And if I admitted I needed help, then I was the weak Omega Nozomu took me for, the one my whole life threatened to make me. I could not be the Omega who had to be rescued by his alpha. I would rather go under, upright, alone, than let myself be saved. So I lied to him. When he wrote, I said everything's fine, lots to do. When he called, I did not pick up. When he stood at my door with food, because he knew I did not cook when I was low, I opened it a crack and said I was sick, and he should not catch it. He looked at me through that crack, and I knew he smelled the scent of fear and shame that no amount of control can hide. And I saw his heart break, and I closed the door anyway. The days on desk duty were the longest of my life. I sat at a desk and sorted files while Nozomu drove patrol outside and nodded to me in passing, polite, like he had done nothing to me. The others did not know what to believe. A few stood by me, quietly, in half sentences at the coffee machine. Most steered clear, not out of malice, but because no one likes to stand next to someone who is falling. I understood it. I would have done the same once. That did not make it easier. And Rintaro. Rintaro did not stop. He did not push. He forced nothing. But he was there, every day, in his quiet way. A thermos of tea that stood at my door in the morning, with no note. A message in the evening, always the same, always without reproach. "I'm here when you're ready." Not a word more. No why, no please, no you're making a mistake. Only, "I'm here." And the longer I pushed him away, the clearer it became that I was doing exactly what I would never have forgiven my father for doing. I was making myself small. I was ducking away from the pain instead of looking it in the face, and I was doing it alone because I mistook pride for strength, and the two are not the same, that I know today. The low point came on an evening when I could not sleep and was at the precinct, though I had no business there, and ran into Nozomu in the canteen, who had the night shift. We were alone. He leaned back, looked at me, and for the first time let the mask fall completely. "You could have just kept your head down," he said, almost friendly, "the way your kind does. But no, you had to be the hero." You know the best part? Everyone believes me, because it's easier to believe. An Omega, who was in over his head. That just makes more sense to people than the truth. He stood, patted my shoulder in passing, so lightly it was almost tender, and that was the cruelest thing about it. "Go home, Asahi. Find work that suits you." I sat a long time in the empty canteen after he had gone. And at some point, when I was at my lowest, at the point where I was starting to believe he was right, that I should make it easier on everyone, that I should disappear, I did not think of my father lowering his head. I thought of my father on the one day, the only day, when he did not. I had been small. A man in a shop had said something to me, something about Omega children, something ugly, and my father, my gentle, quiet father, had stepped between me and the man, and he had not shouted. He had said very calmly, "This is my son, and you will not speak to him like that." And his voice had shaken every word, and he had said it anyway. He did not get loud. He only did not get smaller. And I had understood, even then as a child, without having the words for it, that courage does not mean having no fear, but shaking and standing your ground anyway. I had taken the wrong lesson from his life. I had thought his gentleness was his weakness. But his gentleness was never the weakness. The loneliness was that he had carried everything alone, that he had let no one close enough to stand for him when his voice failed. And here I sat, doing exactly the same thing. I took out my phone. My hands shook, every word I typed. I wrote only 2 sentences. I need help. I don't know how to ask for it. The answer came before I could put the phone down. I'll be there in 11 minutes. And then, a second message. You don't have to know how. You only have to open the door. He was there exactly when he said he would be. Hair a mess, coat thrown over his pajamas, and when I came out, he did not say a single word of reproach. He only looked at me, and then he opened his arms. A question, not a command. And I stepped in. And for the first time, since it all began, I breathed all the way out. His scent settled around me, our scent, and I noticed how much I had missed it, how hungry my body was for it. And I stood there on the sidewalk in front of my own precinct and cried into the coat of an alpha. And I did not feel weak doing it. For the first time in weeks, I felt like myself. Tell me, he said into my hair. Everything, from the beginning, and then we'll figure out together what to do. Together, Asahi. Not me for you, with you. So I told him. In his car, with a cup of tea between my hands, I told him everything. The call, the report, Nozomu, the sentence about my designation, the suspension. He listened without interrupting me, and I saw his jaw tighten at the sentence about my build and how he forced himself to stay calm. And when I was done, he sat still a moment. 2 things, he said at last. First, what he wrote, that sentence about your designation, that's not an assessment of your duty. That's designation discrimination, in black and white, in an official document. That's exactly the kind of case I live for. That alone can bring his whole report down, if we start it right. I looked at him. And second, he turned to me, and there was no grin, only something firm, clear. Word against word, you lose. Your superior already told you that. So it can't be word against word. It has to be the truth against his lie, and the truth has to be something you can put your hand on. It was a call. On a call, there's radio, with times. There are recordings. Who passed what, and when. Your request for backup has a time. His supposed intervention has none, because it never happened, and you weren't alone in that stairwell. There was a woman, there were neighbors, people who saw, who rushed forward, and who stepped in. He laid his hand over mine, over the cup. You're a police officer, Asahi. You know better than anyone how to build a case. You only forgot that this time you're the case. So stop hiding and start investigating. And there, in that car, that night, something happened in me. The fog I had lived in for weeks tore open. He was right. I had been so ashamed that I had forgotten who I was. I was not helpless. I was trained. I knew exactly how to prove what really happened. I had only never done it for myself. The radio traffic, I said slowly. Every call is logged, with a timestamp. If someone pulls the recording, you see that I requested backup before the situation escalated, not after. Can you get at it? Not me. I'm suspended. I don't touch anything that gives Nozomu a second excuse. I thought. Faster now, clearer. But the recording exists whether I'm there or not. You can request it, as my lawyer, officially. Then no one can say, I tampered with anything. For the first time that evening, he smiled, and it was not the grinning smile from the canal. It was something proud, warm. There he is, he said quietly. There's the officer, who went at 3 alphas. I missed him. We worked side by side over the next days, and it was the first time in my life that I sat with someone on the same thing without feeling watched or judged. He requested the radio logs, formally, on his letterhead, and the times were exactly as I had said. My request for backup in black and white, with a timestamp that brought Nozomu's whole account down. I remembered the woman from the stairwell, her name on the doorbell plate, and Rintaro drove out and spoke with her. And she remembered clearly. She remembered the small officer who had thrown himself between her and the knife, while the big one had shoved ahead of him first, and then stood frozen when the blade came out. She was ready to testify. A neighbor, too. And I sat evening after evening at Rintaro's kitchen table, high above the lake, and we built the case, piece by piece, the way I had learned, only this time, for myself. And with every piece of evidence that fit, something straightened in me that had long been bent. One evening, late, when the papers lay between us, and we were both too tired to keep working, he looked at me across the table, a long look. "What?" I said. I'm almost afraid to say it. He stood, came around the table, and I turned on my chair to him, and he knelt in front of me, so that this time I looked down at him, and I understood he was doing it on purpose, that he was giving me this one thing. In this moment, these weeks I've had to watch you hide from me, because you thought needing me makes you weak, and I want to tell you something, and afterward, you're welcome to argue with me. You're the strongest person I know, and not in spite of asking for help, but because of it. It would have been easier to go under alone, and you didn't. Do you know how much more courage that took than going at 3 alphas? I grabbed his collar, the way I had that first night in his kitchen, and pulled him up to me, and this time I did not let him stop. We barely made it to the bedroom. His hands were everywhere and still never demanding, always asking, always waiting for the small yes of my body before they went on, and I gave it to him, again and again, because for the first time, I was not afraid to let myself fall. He pulled my shirt over my head and paused a moment, only to look at me, and his gaze made me hotter than any touch. "Don't look at me like that," I said. "Like what?" "Like I'm something special. You are something special." And then his mouth was at my neck, at the scent gland, and the new scent, our scent, broke over us. So dense the air went heavy with it, and I buried my hands in his hair and pulled him closer. And he pressed me into the pillows with his whole weight, and instead of feeling small, I felt, for the first time in my life, completely held. His lips traveled down my body, slowly, and at every centimeter he murmured my name like a prayer, and I heard my own sounds change, felt my spine arch, and his hands find my hips and hold. "Rintaro, I'm here. Don't stop. Never." His teeth grazed the spot over my scent gland again, and this time I felt how much he held back, how much his alpha wanted to claim me, and how he still did not, because we had promised each other time, and this proof of restraint, this love strong enough to wait, nearly drove me out of my mind. The world went tight and hot and dense, and he whispered against my skin, "I can't stop wanting you." And I whispered back, "Then don't stop," and for a long, breathless, while there was nothing but warm beeswax, and my own heartbeat, and his name in my mouth. Afterward, I lay against his chest, and his heart beat under my ear, slow and strong, and he stroked his thumb over the scent gland at my neck that he had not bitten. "When this is over," he said quietly into the dark, "the hearing, however it goes, I don't want you to think you have to bond so that I'll stay. I'm staying anyway. A bite changes nothing about that. I know." I listened to his heartbeat. "But I want it. Someday. Not because I need you. Because I want you. That's a difference, isn't it?" I felt his smile against my forehead. The biggest difference there is. The night before the hearing, I did not sleep. I sat at the window in Rintaro's apartment, the lake below me, black and still, and turned over in my mind every sentence I might say, and none of them sounded right. Rintaro found me there, long after midnight. He sat down next to me on the floor, his back against the glass, and did not hand me tea or advice, only took my hand. "I have everything we need for tomorrow," he said. "The logs, the witness, the neighbor. Legally, you wouldn't have to say a word. I can do this for you. B, 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 B. I know, but you want to speak yourself." I looked at our hands. "If you speak for me, and we win, then they'll always think the alpha saved the omega. And at some point, I'll start to believe it myself. I swallowed. I have to say at least one sentence myself. Even if it shakes. Maybe, especially then. He was quiet a long time. Then he lifted my hand to his mouth and pressed his lips to my knuckles, and when he spoke, his voice was thick. You know what this work has taught me. Almost no one who walks into a room like that has the kind of courage you just described. They come in wanting to be saved. You're going in wanting to be heard. I don't think you know how rare that is. We stayed sitting like that until dawn, hand in hand, our backs against the cold glass, and at some point the sun came up over the lake and colored the water, and I was not afraid anymore. Or I was afraid and ready anyway, which, I had learned by then, is the same thing. The hearing was held on a gray morning, in a room with too many chairs and too few windows. I wore my uniform, though I was suspended, because I wanted everyone in the room to remember what I was. Nozomu sat across from me, calm, self-assured, believing that a lie everyone would rather believe is as good as the truth. He had his report. He had his experience, his size, his designation. He had everything you normally need to break a small Omega's back. He had only failed to consider one thing, which was that the small Omega did not come alone this time. Rintaro sat beside me, in a suit I had never seen on him, and the man who had lent me an umbrella at the canal and knelt in front of me in his kitchen was gone. In his place sat someone I could only have guessed at, calm and sharp and completely unmoved. And when he began to speak, I understood for the first time why the people he fought for called him. He made no grand speeches. That was the first thing I noticed. He simply laid the truth on the table, one piece after another, so calmly that it left no way out. He put down the radio log with the time of my request for backup and asked politely for Nozomu's explanation of how I could have called for backup too late, when it was requested here, with a timestamp. Before the first blow fell, Nozomu had none. He put down the statement of the woman from the stairwell and the neighbors, both ready to repeat under oath who had stood at the front and who had thrown himself in front of the knife. And then, last of all, without raising his voice, he laid down Nozomu's own report and read out the one sentence, aloud, into the quiet room. The sentence about my build and my designation. I want the panel to hear this sentence exactly, Rintaro said, and his voice was quiet and carried to the last corner. Because it has nothing to do with the call. It says nothing about what happened in that stairwell. It only says that my client is an Omega, and that in the complainant's view, an Omega is unfit for this service. That is not an assessment of his conduct. That is designation discrimination, written in the complainant's own hand in an official document. And I would point out, politely, that a report which ends in a bias like that has to be read with the same bias in every one of its other sentences. It was quiet in the room. Nozomu opened his mouth and closed it again, and I saw the self-assurance leave his face for the first time, saw him grasp that the weapon he had meant to finish me with, my designation, had turned in his hand and now pointed at him. And then the panel's chair looked at me and asked whether I had anything to add. I could have let Rintaro speak. It was going well. He had said everything that needed saying, better than I ever could have. But I stood up, because there are things you have to say yourself, even if someone else could say them more beautifully, and I noticed my hands shaking on the tabletop, and I did not pull them back. I'm not a good speaker, I said, and my voice was not as calm as Rintaro's. It shook, the way my father's had shaken. I don't know how you're supposed to speak in a room like this. I only know what happened in that stairwell. I called for backup, because that's how it's done. And then I stepped in, because there was a knife and a colleague who didn't see it, and because it didn't matter how big I am when I had the choice of letting him get hit or not. I stopped. I nearly lost the thread. I found it again. I've been told my whole life that an Omega isn't made for this. I believed it and did it anyway. I'm not unfit for this service. I might be the only one there that day who did exactly what this service is for. I sat back down, quickly, because the words were running out. And under the table, Rintaro's hand found mine and pressed it. Once. It did not take long. The truth, once you can put your hand on it, does not take long. The report was thrown out. The suspension was lifted, with a formal apology that went into my file, next to nothing. because the other entry disappeared, like it had never been there. And a separate proceeding was opened against Nozomu, for the false statement and for the sentence that in the end cost him more than it cost me. I felt no joy about it. I felt only a large, tired quiet. And beside it, quite warm, the hand that still held mine. Outside, on the steps in front of the building, I stopped and breathed the cold air, and Rintaro stood beside me and said nothing for a while. "You could have let me speak," he said at last, at the end. "I had it under control." "I know." I looked up at the sky, which was starting to break open. "But it was mine. I wanted them to hear it from me, even if it sounded worse." It didn't sound worse. He turned to me, and there it was again. The crooked, slow smile from the canal, the one I loved, by now more than anything. It sounded true. You know, I've heard hundreds of speeches, polished, perfect ones. Yours shook and lost the thread, and was the most convincing thing I've ever heard in a room like that, because you could hear that you don't know how to speak in rooms like that, and spoke anyway. I thought of my father in the shop. "This is my son, and you will not speak to him like that." The shaking voice that did not get smaller. "That," I said quietly, "I learned from someone." We did not bond right away. We did that only much later, when winter came and went and a new spring drew over the lake, on an evening that was nothing special, except that I was sure as I had never been about anything in my whole distrustful life. I asked him for it, not the other way around. I laid his hand at my neck and told him I wanted it, and he looked at me a long time, to be sure it was not a need but a wish, and when he saw it in my face, he cried, "That calm man, one single time." And then he bonded himself to me, and me to him, and the psychic connection that came with it did not feel like a chain. It felt like a window someone had pushed open in a room where I had held my breath alone my whole life. That night, after the mark was set, I felt him from the inside for the first time, his joy passing into me through the new connection, bright and unchecked, and I laughed and cried at once, and he kissed both from my face. We made love slowly this time, without fever, without a deadline, and I felt through the connection what he felt, and he felt what I felt, so that every touch doubled. His hands knew me by heart by now, and still he asked, with his eyes, with a pause, and I answered with my body, "Yes, yes, always yes." At the fresh spot on my neck, I was so sensitive that his breath alone was enough to make me shiver, and when his lips touched it, ever so gently, my whole body arched, and our scent filled the room, denser than ever before. I had told myself my whole life that surrender and strength were opposites. In his arms, that night, I understood once and for all that I had been wrong. I stayed with the police. I'm on patrol again, and I'm still the smallest, and I still walk toward things that others run toward, only with a little more care than before, because now I have someone to come home to. Yuma tells anyone who will listen that he found me first, at that canal, with a single pair of handcuffs. Tsukasa still calls me the bravest police officer in Matsue, and by now, I don't fight it anymore. I did not get smaller. That was the thing I had feared my whole life, and it is the one thing that did not happen. I got bigger, right where I was smallest, and I did not do it alone, and of that, of all things, I am the proudest. And sometimes, on a free evening, Rintaro and I walk along the canal, up to the lamp where it all began, and he stops and says, "This is where you tried to arrest me," and I say, "This is where you got in my way," and then he pulls me to him, and I let myself be pulled, and over the water lies our scent, the new one that neither of us ever carried alone, warm and green and alive, and I am not afraid to carry it anymore. The end. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.